And welcome back, Fully Equipped. J-Wall, serial killer, Uncle Gene. Boys, gotta ask, how we doing?
Oh, buddy. I mean, I'm just fired up, ready to party. Gene was stoked this morning when we got on.
Gene
So
talking about OnlyFans accounts.
Oh, I mean,
Looking
we
for
got
a
to figure
side
out
hustle,
some kind
baby.
of
Looking for a
there's
side
supplemental income all over the place out there.
Uncle
It'll be
Gene OnlyFans. That's a.
I'm not gonna lie, I would. I would subscribe.
You got to be into some weird kink to subscribe to that. But
Gene and his
robots gone wild. Yeah, I'm in. I'm interested.
Oh man, serial killer's the only one. I know only one other person who would probably subscribe to that. It wouldn't be me.
No way.
So I had an impromptu encounter other than the OnlyFans thing last night. I was this is actually like gear kind of OG royalty, and his story is so wild. So I ran into a guy at a restaurant last night who you guys both will know, and hopefully our listeners will know. Sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard this French accent, and I turned, and it was Benoit Vincent.
Oh,
and
nice.
Benoit Vincent, for the listeners who either know or don't know, was a 27-year chief technical officer at TaylorMade. But what made Benoit so interesting was he was there during the rise of TaylorMade, kind of from the bubble shaft. And then he came up with the movable weight system that started the R7, that started the trend in the industry. And he had one of the most amazing runs. And then at his peak, and this was what's so wild, he retired and he became a therapist. He's a counselor, and he's happy as ever, and he does therapy, and it took him like 5 years, and he just got his therapy license. And
do you know what kind of therapy he's doing? I just Googled him.
I don't know what kind of therapy.
He's marriage and family therapy.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy. And he's just like, he told me, because we were talking, and it was so funny because these guys can't change their like mindset. He's like, what is going on in the industry? I'm doing a bad French accent there, but
no, keep going. With the accent, please.
But he's going, he's like thirsty for knowledge in the industry, but at the same time, he's like, yeah, I'm happier than ever. He retired at the peak. And he said from when he was 18, he always wanted to be a therapist, but he was good in math in France. And so he went down this engineering path. And I think he started at Rossignol, actually, before they purchased TaylorMade. So that was kind of his transition. And it was just awesome to see him because his time at TaylorMade was so amazing. And I've talked about this on the pod. I did the first, he contacted me to do a robot test for the rollout of the R7. And we did it at what's now the Grand up in Del Mar.
What made that club so special?
Well, what made it so special, it was the first commercially mass-produced club with movable weights. So you had weights, toe, and heel. And what was interesting to me was I had tested a club that had weights, toe, and heel years earlier, and it had not succeeded in the marketplace. And I thought this was just a regurgitation of that. But what made Benoit so amazing was he came up with interesting technology, and then the marketing department at the time at TaylorMade, I saw this presentation and I became a convert of this. I mean, it was just amazing how they talked about things like vertical gear effect and the ability to work the ball. And he rode that, and he was riding at one point, they were releasing 2 driver models a year. I mean, it was
more than that.
Was it more than that? It was like
during like the jet speed days.
Yeah,
it was a performance model, a game improvement model.
They had like
releases.
four different like like separate models of drivers that it felt like they were releasing. It was nuts.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off, but yeah, I mean they were just churning out clubs at that point. And I think that was really peak. That was like peak gear release season, because you didn't know what was coming, especially from TaylorMade. And I think that's what turned a lot of people off, at least for a little while, because they just were like, well, shit, I just bought a brand new driver in January, and now you're telling me my driver's obsolete 6 months later.
It definitely had some backlash. And I know a certain writer that, not you, J-Wall, but a certain writer who I was talking to during that time. And he called me up and he goes, you're not going to believe what the next TaylorMade product's named. And I go, what? And he goes, rocket balls. And I go, really? And he goes, if that succeeds in the market, I'm quitting. And I'm like, you might want to hedge that bet, because based on their, and I think it was until like the Sim 2 that it finally like crested and they started to go down a little bit. But
rocket balls was huge. That was
rocket balls was
TaylorMade's
huge.
introduction to speed slot.
Yeah, I mean, they finally kind of jumped the shark when they went to the super high launch, low spin that nobody could hit. You know, the Loft Up campaign and everything. That was the first time that they kind of missed. But man, they must have had a run for like 6 years where they were talking about during that run. And I remember, and I don't think they ever executed it, but there were like rumblings about it, that they were going to go the way of Apple and start opening up just TaylorMade only stores, and, you know, in malls and things like that. I mean, they were that big and that hot at that time.
EXG eventually did that.
Yes, they did. And it was great to see him. He's totally content being a marriage and family
therapist now. Who the hell would have seen that coming?
You know, F. Scott Fitzgerald said there's no second acts in America, but he proved that wrong. And he retired at his peak, and he said, I had enough money, I didn't need money, and I wanted to do what I was passionate about. And so anyways, really it was really good to see him, but it brought back this like flood of memories of that time period.
Heck yeah.
And it was funny because he was asking me what I was up to, and I was explaining some of the things that I was involved with, and you could just see his technical mind like brimming with excitement, because, you know, it's like he's working on the touchy-feely side of his personality, but he's still got that innovative side. And he's like, that is a really interesting idea. I'm not even attempting my French accent anymore, because that first one was so bad.
It was so great.
Anyways, it was good to see him, and he's doing well. And it was just a reminder of kind of one of these golden eras in the industry. It was, there's been a few eras. The biggest, without a doubt, was Callaway when the Big Bertha came out. That was just a run like no other, that all ships rose. But the TaylorMade run was equal. And I'd say kind of the third run that comes to my mind is PXG, in bringing up the price point and just doing something truly innovative as far as, but in my time in this industry, those are kind of some of the big three runs that I've seen. Well, you probably have to throw in the Pro V1 on the ball side too, just for sure. an amazing run. But anyways, it was good seeing him. He's doing well. And it was a cool blast from the past.
Yeah. I love that he hit reset.
That's awesome.
He was there for almost 3 decades.
I know.
Which is just crazy.
I know.
He was always a good conversation to have if you could nail him down.
Oh, he had one of the greatest. I called him out, and he is very French and very direct. And I called him up. He bought like the second robot. TaylorMade has had like 4 or 5 of my robots over the years. So he bought the second one. And I called him up like a month or 2 later. I said, Benoit, how is the robot? And he said, Gene, he said, the robot is very good. No problem with the robot. But this tea table, this is the worst design I've ever seen in my life. What do I do with this tea table? I don't know. It's just a horrible design. What do I do with it? And I'm like, I don't know, Benoit. It came with the robot. You own it now. You want to make it into like a
Figure it
coffee
out.
table? You can. It's yours. And he's like, I don't know about this tea table. It's horrible. It's a horrible design. And I was like, okay, but how about like the swinging part of the robot and the testing? Oh, that is fine. But back to this tea table is one of the worst designs I've ever seen. See, I can't help
Oh
myself.
no, that
I
was
had
so
to go
great.
back to it.
I just love that. Like Benoit probably spent countless hours trying to figure out the tea table. Like everything else is good, but he's just fixated on it.
He just looked at the tea table and he was like, "This is one of the worst designs I've ever seen." And I was like, "Rock on, dude! You own it."
It's shit.
Oh my gosh!
But anyways, great guy and oversaw an amazing run at TaylorMade, and they came out with some amazing products during that.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And again, I guess only in San Diego, really. Like,
Yeah.
if you're a lifer in the gear industry, you're probably going to hang around the area. But that's cool that you saw Benoit.
Well, it's really funny. If you're up in Carlsbad, there's only so many places to go to lunch. You have to be really careful when you go to Carlsbad.
Everybody's got their own turf, right? Like people have, like OEMs have their own spots.
But occasionally they'll step on each other's turfs, like gang wars type thing. And it's just, you have to be really conscious about the conversations you have.
A side story.
Yeah.
Little snap.
Well, and everybody's eyeballing everybody else. Like, oh, look who's having lunch with the Cobra guys, or look who's having, and it's just, it's a small little incestuous industry.
Nothing is sacred in that industry. It always ends up getting back to whoever it's about.
It has a tendency, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
It's such a small, tight-knit community, and I mean, it's pretty relevant when, or pretty apparent, I should say, when you find somebody that somebody else doesn't particularly care for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't burn bridges. Let's just put it that way.
Nope, definitely not.
You burn one, you might as well just walk away.
Yeah,
you're not getting hired anywhere else. Oh. All right. Well, before we get into to some relevant gear topics, I want to let you know that this week's episode of Fully Equipped is brought to you by our good friends at Nikon and their CoolShot Pro 2 Stabilize. This is Nikon's high-performance stabilization system that's designed to reduce vibrations of the image in the viewfinder caused by hand movements. And look, I got to be honest, this is one of the things, and I'm riffing here. I'm not RB, but I'm going to do my best. This is one of the things that I absolutely hated about rangefinders initially, which was you could never quite tell if what you were shooting was actually the intended target. And let me tell you, if you're spending that kind of coin for a rangefinder, you want to make sure that thing's actually giving you your intended target. So this is what's so cool about this Pro 2 Stabilize. It has a dual locked-on echo technology that's indicated by a green lit circle in the display. And it's actually going to emit an audible sound to tell the user that the distance of the flag stick has been reported and confirmed. So there you go. It's going to be able to let you know that what you're shooting is what you should be shooting, not the tree behind you or the bunker or anything else that might be around there. So in addition to that, it also has a hyper read technology that gives the user a fast and accurate measurement response regardless of the distance. It's actually 0.3 seconds, which I don't even know if I can think about anything in 0.3 seconds. So
definitely
not my brain. Anyway, this thing, bottom line, it's going to give you accurate reads. It's going to emit the audible sound to let you know that you are getting the flag stick or whatever you're trying to shoot out in the distance. It's going to give it to you quick, which is really important when you're playing golf because nobody wants to play in 4.5 and 5 hours. I guess not unless maybe if you don't have a family. I can't relate to this. But if you don't have a family, maybe you want to play in 5 hours. But for those of us that want to get around the course quickly and efficiently, this rangefinder is going to help you do that. It also has an incline, decline technology display, slope adjusted, which is a really cool feature. Old rangefinders, you would get the target, but you could never really quite get the exact yardage if it was to an elevated green or going back downhill. This device is going to help you do that as well. Anyway, if you want to learn more, go check it out on Nikon's website. This is the CoolShot Pro 2 Stabilize. And if you like the sound of this rangefinder, I think we're still giving away 3 of them. on the Fully Equipped Instagram page. That's at Fully Equipped Golf. Go check it out for all the details and win you one of these guys. I think this one actually is going to Serial Killer because he needs a rangefinder and he's been begging me. So he's going to get this one. Anyway, thanks again to Nikon for sponsoring the pod. All right. So I was doing some driver testing recently and I was testing my gamer driver. I've got a Ping G430 LSD, 45.5-inch shaft, against a driver that I went out, and we've discussed it a little bit on the podcast recently. I went out to TPI in Oceanside, California. It's one of, I would say there's probably a couple of golf meccas, but TPI is for sure in the mix. And while I was out there, I tested the complement of the GT drivers, ended up in a GT3 at 44.5. Now, I've not played anything before underneath 45. I'm 6'5". I've always felt like I needed a longer driver, although my irons are standard length because of my long arms, which I still can't figure that one out. But as I was testing the driver, I thought, man, this thing is just so consistent. The impact's good. I had an issue getting my gamer driver to TPI. Traffic was really bad at the airport, and I decided to just leave it in the car instead of trying to figure it out. So I tested it back at home, and my goodness, like Chris, I'm sure you see this a lot. 1 inch doesn't seem like a lot of length relative to I guess in golf is what I'm trying to say, is where it really makes a huge difference. Going from 44.5 to 45.5 to 44.5. I mean, I was centering that golf ball time and time again. I had, if I was hit one on the toe with this GT driver, it was spinning at 2000 instead of like 1200 or 1300. I don't think I saw spin jump more than like 27, maybe 28. So I was kind of in that like 22, 23 to 28 range. And for a non-tour pro, I was beyond ecstatic with that. If I can keep the spin rates in that range, 23 to 28, I'm a happy camper. Compare that to a driver that was 45.5. I mean, I had spin rates up to like 38, all the way down to, 12. And so that to me at least confirmed like, wow, okay, maybe I should try the LST as well in a shorter length, see what happens. Do a head-to-head as a apples to apples. But it got me wondering, because that driver is 44.5 and I already have a mini driver at 43 3/4. And here's where the dilemma comes in. So I was carrying the GT3 about an average at 277 carry. My mini is now at 267. Feels dangerously close, my man.
Dangerously close.
What the hell am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go, as I said on social media, am I supposed to go full fill with two drivers? Or like, what would be the recommendation in a situation like that?
So, I mean, I'm going to look at both from a little bit broader lens. So, I mean, not only am I looking at carry number, but I'm also going to be looking at essentially the initial vertical launch, how it comes out, dynamic loft presented at impact, what your apex height is getting to, what your landing angle is getting to, sustainability of ball speed on the miss. So what is your average ball speed, average carry over a larger sample size? And then, I mean, I'm really paying attention to what is the next club from there. So as you transition through your bag, and when we're talking about set composition, like, okay, if we go 277, 267, and we're trying to make a decision between those two, dispersion plays a huge part. And generally speaking, that off the tee option is all about distance, with control being a close second, but trying to maximize distance off the tee to give you the shortest potential second shot into a green, so to maximize your scoring possibilities, so on and so forth. I mean, where do you transition in the bag after the driver / mini driver? What's the next club in the long game?
That's the big question. I've got a utility 2 iron, and I have a 21 degree 7 wood. That's I think it's actually about an inch shorter than standard length. So it's still like a like a 235 club for me. So that's what I'm concerned about, is like this gap between driver, mini driver so tight, then you got a gap. And I don't really know if it's that big of a deal, because how often am I really going to like get into that like 230 range and really, I don't know. I just feel like
and
I just feel like I may be being inefficient.
That's part of the conversation too, right? Is if I'm looking at the setup of a player's bag, and we're talking specifically about the long game. So those, for me, I kind of describe it as proximity clubs. So very few players in the world are going to go and try and pin hunt from 230 yards. No, from 200
Uncle
yards.
Gene will.
He'll pin him from of course he will. Of course he will. He's a specimen. And you get into, I mean, where is it in your bag that you start to have confidence and go, okay, I'm going to intentionally fire at a pin? You know, for some players, you don't see that until you get down to scoring irons, and you get into a 8-iron, 9-iron, wedge, what have you. So if we're going back into the long game and that top end of the bag, and we look at the majority of those clubs being what I referred to, like I said, as proximity clubs, and we're looking at more of a distance play and getting us into the proximity of the green, and accuracy is going to be something that is relative, depending upon the skill level of the player. So if we are, let's just call it for round numbers, 280 off the tee with driver, and your 270 off the tee with mini driver, and now you have this potential gap in that 230 yard range, and we're making a decision between driver and mini driver. Like I said, I'm looking at it from a little bit bigger picture and talking about dispersion, talking about consistency of ball speed, talking about apex height and landing angle. Because if the higher lofted mini driver is giving you an apex height of, let's just say, 130 feet with a landing angle of 42, 43 degrees, but the driver is carrying at, I think you said, what was it, 277?
Yep.
Driver's carrying at 277 and the apex height's 110 feet and the landing angle is 38 degrees, the potential for more total yardage is going to be greater more often with the driver.
Okay.
So that's where it kind of comes into play of, okay, we prioritize carry number because that's a variable that we have more control over. But if we're looking at potential for total yardage, your potential for total yardage is going to be greater with the driver because of the launch dynamics, apex height, spin, landing angle. So that's where when I'm putting a player's bag together, I'm making sure that the gapping is appropriate for yardages that we typically encounter, but then I'm also making sure that the potential for yardage with those distance-oriented clubs is going to be maximized to their full potential just based upon their flight characteristics. So I would want to see those side by side. I'm going to have to go back
and look at my numbers.
And yep.
And
I think we should post them and have an open forum discussion about it.
I definitely will. I definitely will.
Isn't it too, if you introduce something like a mini driver, you're taking something away, like a potential wedge, right? I mean, you know, because you still.
Well, I don't have a 3-wood in the bag.
You don't have a 3-wood.
Yeah, I suck with it.
But I mean,
that's what the mini driver Band-Aid's a major hole in my bag that I've never been able to.
And you're comfortable hitting the mini driver off the deck?
To an extent. This is the older version. The newer one they said is a little bit better from the fairway. I've hit this one. I'm just. We've talked about this one on the podcast before. Chris has seen me in the fitting bay. I am almost like positive attack sometimes with a fairway wood. That's some scary stuff when you're trying to hit it off the turf. That's leading to a lot of worm burners. It is.
And Speed Pocket Tech is all about J-Wall's game.
Yeah.
Hit it low on the face, doesn't go crazy on spin, and still wants to launch and have a good amount of ball speed. Makes sense.
You know, speaking of that, I texted Chris. Was that yesterday or last week? I can't remember. But I was asking him.
Figure out most things. Can't remember most things.
I can't remember most things. I'm so shut out at this point. But I was asking him what the range was of like a 7-iron for attack angle. and he said it was, what did you say, like -4 to +2 on attack angle? Yeah, that he sees in fittings. And thankfully, based on the GC quad that I use, I can dial in and figure out attack angle and kind of adjust it. So I was showing a player the other day, what the effect of it. I mean, so many players don't understand attack angle, and it's like one of the most integral parts of the game from a fitting standpoint. But I was just taking a 7-iron, and it was wild off of the quad. I got -8 and +5 on 2 shots, and I mean, I barely hit it without topping it for +5, but I actually got the ball in the air at +5. But it is a wild swing to like hit up on an iron and get +5 attack angle. And -8, you're playing it like off of the right side of your right foot, and it's just it's like an axe coming down.
So you wouldn't get that out of the ground. That's
no,
that's
you
not
wouldn't
coming out
get
of
it.
the turf.
Yeah, you'd probably break the club, but it just like seeing the difference in launch angle between those two. And the reason I thought of it, to your point, man, if you don't know your attack, like this player, he's probably a 13, 14 handicap, but he's trending down. He couldn't get past 0 on attack angle, just could not get it. But he didn't know what attack angle was. And then when we were looking at his numbers, his spin is up in the 3,000s, 3,400 because he's -2, -3 on attack angle. And it was like I was trying to show him with the quad the importance of attack angle, and his eyes just kind of lit up like, wow, and most golfers don't understand that we swing on an arc and that we go down neutral at 6 o'clock and up, and the importance of that arc in relation to these clubs like a driver, mini driver, fairway, and then hybrids and irons. So, for the listeners out there, man, it's important to know your club head speed, your launch, and your spin, but attack angle is another really, really critical aspect. Twofold. One, to figure out if you have to take lessons if you're far enough off of kind of the optimal, but two, the type of equipment that you're going to need based on that attack angle, because it's going to have serious effects on launch and spin. And if you're a spaz like J-Wall, club selection as well. So, I mean, these things are all important.
Yeah.
So think about that, going back to J-Wall, for example. I mean, if you have somebody like Gene was saying, -8 versus somebody that is +2, 3, 4 degrees, I mean, it's difficult to create a positive angle of attack with an iron past 2 or 3 degrees. I mean, that's an extreme change of direction in the swing and delivery pattern. So if you're looking at it from a gear perspective and a fitting perspective and just focusing on club head, for example, like there's not an industry standard for loft, and a lot of consumers and players don't understand how big of a gap there can be between one OEM 6-iron loft versus another. So, I mean, we're talking about the potential of as strong as 23 degrees in a 6-iron versus as weak as something more traditional like 31 degrees. So if you're looking at that range for a quote unquote 6-iron loft, now we apply that to like application numbers, and you go, okay, now you've got this guy that's swinging down 5 or 6 degrees, has a ton of leverage and a ton of forward shaft lean. He's a higher index player, and he's trying to hit down on it 4, 5, 6 degrees with an iron that has a 25, 26 degree loft on a 6-iron. The likelihood of him being able to produce a decent ball flight out of that's actually going to sustain spin and hold greens when it's coming out of the air, that's tough, man. That's tough.
And yeah, it's all the stuff that I don't really know if a lot of golfers are taking into consideration.
No, of course not.
Yeah. But I think this is again where it highlights the importance of having a fitter who knows what the hell they're doing.
Sure. And I mean, it's no fault of the player, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you go in and you go, I hit my 6-iron X number of yards.
Yep.
You test at a big box store and you hit it into a screen with no real guidance, and you go, oh, this new one goes further. I picked up X number of yards with this new golf club, not realizing that you just went from 29 degrees on your 6-iron down to 26, and now you're basically hitting closer to what was your old 5-iron, and you lost spin, you lost 10, 12, 15 feet of apex height. Your landing angle went from 40 degrees down to 37, and at some point you hit a point of diminishing returns to where it's no longer playable. And that's what we see every day. And it's, like I said, no fault to the consumer. You don't know what you don't know. And you just go, oh, I hit this one further. But when it comes to application and like scoring potential, we get into a slippery slope quick.
Yeah. Having a good fitter, but also having a good launch monitor to use when you're testing makes such a impact as far as like helping school the golfer and what the hell they're doing and what they're seeing. I mean, because you and I were testing driver shafts in Scottsdale like a month or so ago.
Yep.
And I think it was really one of the first times where you were like, buddy, look at like I knew I was inside out with my path, but that was one of the first times where you're like, wow, look how inside out you are. And from that point forward, like, and I don't think I told you this, but I really started to like fixate. And I have a Foresight GC quad that I use here at home for all my testing. And it's the only launch monitor I use. I swear by it. And I've been really focusing on trying to straighten out my path. I mean, I was like 12, 14. I mean, it was legit. Like I'm just dragging it inside and just moving that as hard as I can out. And a lot of that was just trying to keep it kind of left to center line as a lefty, left to center line. But
sure,
again, a good fitter and a good launch monitor are so important in just helping you learn about your game. And from that point, you can start to make your own adjustments, or you can start to have your own voice during a fitting and not feel like the fitter has to lead you the whole way, but you feel like you know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah, it's important to understand cause and effect, right? And
sure.
I mean, through the fitting process, having the conversation with the player and I know we've talked about this on previous episodes, where it's go into the fitting with an objective, right? And be able to communicate what it is your objective is. So if you're a right-handed player and you struggle with a right miss or a left miss, or it's just an unstable ball flight and you have a two-way miss, I mean, the more information that we have, the better off we are when we start to put pieces of the puzzle together to come to a conclusion that everybody's comfortable with. And there is so much good gear out there, like we've talked about. I mean, you can really get picky with, what it is that you're trying to see as far as a launch window or a start direction or dispersion or curvature downrange. If you are somebody that likes to see the ball move right to left, or you hate to see it move too far left or too far right, there's so much good stuff that you can really correct that ball flight and kind of dial in that miss.
Yeah. All right. Well, Uncle Gene decided to eject. I don't know. Everybody's just leaving me. I don't know what it is. It's just you and me. I think he's having computer issues, but we'll just keep the pod rolling. Oh wait.
Oh, I see the wheel. Had a senior moment. Gene breaks the internet 2.0.
Anyway, while we're waiting for Gene to boot back up, I want to let you know that Fully Equipped is brought to you by our good friends at Golf Pride and their reverse taper grip. It's the most crucial split second in golf. You can't worry about if the ball is going in the hole or not if you haven't worried about what's happening at impact. That's why let Golf Pride to design a grip to ensure you're set up to succeed in that split second, the very moment where the putt is decided. With the reverse taper technology, it ensures that you have a consistently square face at impact. And look, of all the things that you're going to be able to control, square face at impact is so important. And that's where reverse taper comes into the picture. The reverse taper design has a slim upper hand and a larger lower hand. And this is the design that I know that they were working on for years, which sounds crazy when you think about it, because it's a putting grip. But they took so much feedback and then took that feedback and created this reverse taper design. It also has a soft feel with an enhanced tacky texture. a dimple pattern throughout the grip to support traction, and the technology that stabilizes both hands for a more square putter face at impact. And this, as I'm saying this, a more square putter face at impact, this was tested, the reverse taper was tested against a parallel style putter grip, which is a pretty common grip nowadays, which tells you a lot about like parallel style was designed to help kind of quiet the hands and keep the face square. Reverse taper is able to do that, but it's able to do it in a better and more efficient way. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the reverse taper grip from Golf Pride, go check it out on golfpride.com. Own the moment of impact, own the putt. Thanks again to Golf Pride for sponsoring the podcast. All right, well, I think Uncle Gene tried to get back in here. We were going to discuss TaylorMade Qi10 because he had some fun insights. And what the hell? We could just discuss it here for a little bit. I was hoping to get his robotic insights. Maybe he pops back on. Maybe he doesn't. So during the men's competition at the Olympics, you had Scotty Scheffler with gold, Tommy Fleetwood winning silver, Hideki Matsuyama winning bronze. Like three of the best dudes out there, not just as far as like the quality golf that they play, but just really good guys. But they had a common denominator, which was they all three played a TaylorMade Qi10 fairway wood in some form or fashion. Scotty, his lone fairway wood in the bag was a Qi10 3 wood. Tommy Fleetwood was using the Qi10 in a 5 wood and a 9 wood. We want to talk about we want to talk about a fun golf club, 9 wood. Oh my gosh. We'll have a little bit more high lofted talk next week. I don't want to tease it too much because I'm trying to get it all together, but we might have a really awesome guest on for the pod. Also, Hideki was using a Qi10 3 wood. Chris, I don't know if have you seen a lot. Oh, Uncle Gene's back. Big surprise. He was checking out his OnlyFans account.
Hey,
but hey, the Qi10 fairway, and I want Uncle Gene to offer up some robotic insights because it was really impressive during robotic testing this year. But Chris, what have you seen from Qi10 in the fairway wood? Has it popped for on the retail side as much as it has on the tour side? I mean, it's been winning left and right out on tour.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fantastic for us at TrueSpec, just from a fitting perspective, and going head to head with a lot of the other OEM fairway wood offerings. The Qi10, specifically the core head, that core head has been really, really good for us, and it's a great combination of speed and forgiveness. And I mean, you marry those two together for a player that isn't necessarily as comfortable or as confident with their driver, that fairway wood still produces a really good amount of pop. And I see that particular model, that core model, like we said, just winning gunfights day after day after day after day. And I mean, that's a testament when you have top players in the world and they're selecting that golf club, which is historically a difficult golf club to get into a competitive player's bag when they have something that performs. So the fact that you see that model, I mean, finding its way into more and more players' bags, I mean, that validates how good that particular club is right there. And we've seen the same success, I mean, just in our own independent brand agnostic fitting environments too.
Yeah. Gene, what were the numbers? I mean, I did a quick story on Qi10 Max. It was seriously impressive. Heel toe consistency, launch angle. It was good, but it really felt like it was the entire crop of Qi10 products that performed really well during testing.
Well, what was so interesting about the Qi10 line is, and this is kind of something that's important for, golfers that listen or view this pod. There's a big difference between the Tour and the Qi10 and the Qi10 Max. So, for example, average, the Tour, it was launching at 13.1, which out of all the 2024 fairway woods was the lowest, and spinning at 31.02, which was also the lowest. And it had the highest ball velocity, 139.2. So if you bring it, this club is hot. And if you bring it, you can generate enough spin to potentially, hold a green or at least hit a fairway, and it without a doubt was the hottest fairway wood. Now the QI10 and the QI10 Max, 15.6 and 16 degrees. So 2.5 to 3 degrees higher on launch, 44.69 on the QI10 spin, 46.23, which was interesting. Those were two of the highest spinning and highest launching clubs. So TaylorMade did a really interesting job with the QI10 models in that they built a rocket ship for better players and tour players. And then they built kind of more of a traditional 3-wood. And we talked about last week, if you're below 82, 83 miles an hour, which is basically kind of almost half the bell curve of golfers, your 3-wood, due to its launch and spin characteristics, can go further than your drivers. So they built those clubs with that in mind, and also kind of fairway finders, the ability to hit it in the short grass. But if you're a better player and you're looking for an option that's going to maximize distance, bore through the wind, and really go a long way, the QI10 Tour is an exceptional product.
Yeah. It's interesting as I started to see QI10 trend on tour, it makes me think that it's going to end up being the new Simtai. Like that Simtai fairway was awesome. Really strong. You saw it in a lot of guys' bags. Some players are still using it. I know Tiger had one in the bag until recently, and then he switched it out for QI10, the tour version. But I could totally see this becoming like that new club that just hangs around for 4, 5, 6 years. It's been so good. It also makes me think that sometimes, like when fairways, especially because they are so hard to get out of the bag, especially for tour pros, it's one of those years where I'm like, man, if they could just like continue that on, like don't even come out. I know TaylorMade's not going to do that because they're all about innovating, but just keep it in the lineup. Just maybe I don't know. It's tough to just make a new driver, but keep the fairways. But yeah, they nailed this one. It is most definitely a fairway wood year for TaylorMade. That's for sure. Okay. With that, something we haven't done in a while, Fully Equipped Hotline, which is brought to you by our good friends at Fairway Jockey. We're going to get into some questions. We've had a bunch. And if you haven't left us a voicemail before, but you listen to the podcast, like, come on, what are you doing? Leave us a voicemail. 602-935-4974. Again, that's 602-935-4974. Leave us a voicemail about your gear in your bag, what you're testing, Uncle Gene's OnlyFans account. I mean, literally anything and everything. We just come on, just leave us a voicemail. Anyway, all right. So before we do get into this week's batch, I think Coach has 4. As I mentioned, the hotline is brought to you by Fairway Jockey, and man, oh man, do they have an extensive line of products on their website. I think I mentioned it last time. They have a great pre-owned selection for those of you that are maybe looking for something that isn't new. But if you are looking for new stuff, this is a very big week for gear. We didn't even get into some of the new gear releases, which is fine, because if you want to learn more about them, go check them out on golf.com. We have write-ups on the new Callaway Apex irons. They've got the new Apex AI 200, the AI 300, and the Tie Fusion. Those Tie Fusions look super sexy. Really impressive looking iron. And oh, by the way, AI, they're bringing AI into the iron space. So it's everywhere now.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? But if you're curious about those irons after reading the stories on golf.com, you can go and pre-order them on Fairway Jockey. So that's one of the great things, because not every website allows you to get in your pre-orders that early. So make sure you go do that. And if you want to purchase something on Fairway Jockey, use promo code Fully Equipped, FULLYEQUIPPED, for 10% off. Again, that's FULLYEQUIPPED on Fairway Jockey to get 10% off your order. All right, Coach, we're going to get through these quick because I think Uncle Gene has a meeting to get to.
No, I have GT testing to do.
Oh, even better. Even better.
Even better.
Are we? Is it like the beginning of GT testing, or did you start yesterday?
We've completed a number of them. We're getting our groove on.
Yes.
So
We're gonna have GT insights soon, and we're gonna. Oh, by the way, we're
Yeah.
gonna be comparing those to TSR and TSI because we have insights from previous testing. This is gonna be a fun year
nice.
for Robot. Yeah,
Yeah.
very excited. All right, so Coach, question number 1. Let's get to it.
All right. Just a reminder for everyone, please try to keep these short. This one is a little bit longer, but it posed an interesting question, and I felt bad for the guy. He needs some advice on how he gets fit properly, knowing that he has a short shaft.
Oh, yes. This is Tyler, second-time caller from up in New York. I have a question for Chris or whoever else would like to chime in. I have never been fitted for a driver or anything else, kind of self-diagnosed. I'm a shorter guy, and I'm very steep on the ball. In my driver shaft that I typically play is a very short driver shaft, and how that would go into a club champion or a true spec or something in that nature on how I would get fit. What I currently play, I play an older Adela RIP Phenom NL 80TX, hip 1 3/4 and plays at 41 inches. And I was just thinking of how I could go and get fit, but have something in the matrix that would work for me in those type of aspects to try to get as much distance as I possibly could out of my driver, but also feel like where I'm not completely uncomfortable with what I'm hitting. But I'd love to hear you guys' response and love the show. Can't wait to hear back.
Chris?
That's an interesting build, to say the least. So, I mean, if he's in that 41-inch length category, 80 TX, tipped at well over an inch, I mean, I would want to see the swing. I would encourage a video coming in to see that swing. So something to keep in mind. I mean, as you take a shaft that's that heavy and that stiff already, and then you cut it down and you tip it, it's making it even stiffer. But in addition to that, something else to keep in mind when it comes to just that length, the shorter a driver gets, generally speaking, and again, we just speak in general terms without being able to test it, the steeper the angle of attack will have a tendency to get. So depending upon what your miss is, whether it be right or left, if you're a right-handed player, the shorter shaft will more often than not lend itself to a more left bias start direction with a steeper angle of attack, which can potentially increase spin as well. So the longer shaft could help you get a little more shallow with your delivery, even move you more towards that positive angle of attack, get your start direction a little further right, and also help with launch and spin and club head speed, and as a result, ball speed. So when it comes to actually going to a fitter, I can't think of any fitting facility that would have a shaft that would even be close to the type of shaft that you're currently playing in, not only the weight and the build, but also the length. So that would be something relatively difficult to test, kind of apples to apples. I mean, it's almost one of those scenarios that you would have to kind of address it at more of a boutique-y type of fitting environment. So, I mean, reaching out to a one-man show or a fitter instructor that has an opportunity to provide a little bit of coaching in addition to helping with equipment, as true spec, club champion, PGA Superstore, Cool Clubs, Hot Sticks, any of the big fitting entities, the likelihood of finding something that would be even comparable is almost zero. So while it's a really unique and interesting build, and I would love to get some numbers and do some testing with it and see what we could potentially do to figure out something better in kind of a normality realm. 44 to, I mean, even 43 and a half, just giving us a little bit more length and potentially opening up the swing. I'm curious. I want to see a video of the swing and hit up the DMs and we can chat, because I've got so many questions now. Gene, J-Wall, your thoughts?
You know what's interesting to me is, how did he come across this? Like, in other words, how did he end up with, who said, I mean, unless you're just spraying the ball or doing something, I mean, that's a pretty draconian measure to go to 41 on a driver shaft. I mean, that's what's fascinating to me is, I almost feel like, I mean, kind of, I don't know, I don't know how tall this guy is, but you can still hit a 44-inch driver if you're 5'5" or 5'4". You flatten it out a little bit, to your point. He may have, someone may have, unless he's, a very high handicap player who's really struggling, he may have just simply got misfit. And because of that, he's adapted his swing accordingly. And he may find, wow, not only can I hit a 44-inch club that maybe you struggled with before properly fit, but the second thing is, oh my goodness, I'm 10, 15 yards further because now I have this added length, and now I have all these things that I can play with, launch and spin. So yeah, to your point, Chris, it would be really interesting to see numbers. And then from the numbers, you could say, okay, here's your roadmap. You've got X yards just simply by maximizing your launch conditions. And then you have X yards by increasing the length. So unless it's something, due to kind of coordination or skill level, the good news is this guy's got a lot of upside to, potentially enjoy the game a lot more.
Yeah, and I would kind of make assumptions, obviously, without knowing the player, knowing his skill level, knowing what type of head he's playing. So, I mean, I look at that length being a potential issue simply because the fact that if we look at the LPGA Tour, for example, and a lot of our international players that are right around that 5 foot to 5'5" or less range, and a lot of those women at a very high level are still able to swing 44 to 45-inch drivers and be extremely successful with them. So to get into that 41 less than 42-inch category, I'm really curious how we got there, and then also what it would take to potentially back it off a little bit and get back into something that is more playable, as I would feel like we're giving something up there.
It's fascinating, and it reminds me of a wacky story, but I got a lot of wacky stories. So when I fell off that mountain in the Dolomites and fell off the cliff and landed,
where's this story going?
On the rock, I called the doctor.
Keep it tight.
I can't keep it tight. I don't even know what those words mean. And I'm the one who supposedly had to get out early today. I called this doctor buddy of mine, and I'm like, dude, I'm a mess. I really screwed myself up. And he's like, what's going on? And I explained it. And he's like, all right, are you peeing blood? And I'm like, no. And he's like, do you have a fever? And I go, no. And he goes, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're not dying, and like, that's as far as he could go without doing proper diagnostics. And that's kind of the same thing on this pod is, we listen to these stories and they're really fascinating, but because of the amount of data or information that we have, we can only go so far. And then we start getting into the theoretical and it highlights for everyone out there, man, get on a launch monitor, get in front of somebody. And I know we harp on this all the time, but we're the people that do this for a living, and we still can't diagnose what the issue is just based on a voicemail. We really need to see data, but we can theorize and get him in a certain direction, which, is positive. But it's like, man, without data and a proper analysis, it really becomes a challenge to, nail down exactly what's going on.
For sure. All right, Coach, next one.
We're going to hop over to a question about how players choose their wedges on tour.
Yeah, this is Bob from Michigan. My question is about irons and wedges. Most tour pros predominantly play forged irons because of their feel. Yet those same pros play milled wedges, which I don't believe is as soft as a forged club. My question is, for wedge play, where feel is of the utmost importance, why don't pros play more forged wedges, and why are they playing the milled wedges, which are a little bit harder?
All right.
That's a good question. I got the gist of it. I mean, if you're looking at wedge play specifically, I mean, the majority of tour players are going to prioritize turf interaction, shape, and how it suits their eye and how it moves through the turf. Feel, like we've talked about, is kind of subjective. So whether it be a cast club, a forged club, a milled club, I mean, even Callaway's new Opus wedge that is MIM technology, which is metal injection molding. I mean, there's so many different variables that go into wedge fitting. And for a tour player that potentially has access to anything that's out there, their feel is going to be associated primarily with consistency of weight, turf interaction, and just playability around the greens. So whether the wedge is, like I said, forged, cast, or mimmed or milled, the feel, the performance, the playability, all of those things come into play. And Gene, I'm curious to get your opinion, because forged wedges historically just don't last because the metal that they typically forge them out of is substantially softer, so they wear out faster. The spin consistency just doesn't last as long as something that is cast. But I mean, that is so far down on the level of importance, in my opinion, when it comes to wedge fitting, that there's just not a lot of people that are asking for forged wedges. And it's more often than not the most replaced club category in the bag. Then forging is going to be more expensive than casting, and people just don't want to spend the money on it. Tour players, they have access to everything, but at the same time, like, once they find something that really works, they don't like to change very often, unless they're contracted to. And the biggest thing that they change is grind and bounce. But shape, sound, spin consistency, turf interaction is where they prioritize more things than anything else.
That's it. You raise a couple of really interesting points. The first point, and I discovered this years ago, and I've discovered it subsequently, is, when I first got in this industry, not when I first got in, but probably 10 years in, 15 years in, when launch monitors and especially reliable spin numbers started becoming more ubiquitous in the industry. I was like, wow, I can't wait to put a forged club on versus a cast club. And there's going to be such a huge performance difference. And there was none. I mean, there's a little bit of a loft difference, but I was like, whoa, wait a minute. There's, what's going on here with these categories? And I was so confused. And it ultimately, Chris, to your point, it's not about performance. It's about feel. But you raise a really interesting point about milled and spin consistency. And Titleist did this test, and they quantified it where they tested different grooves of different wedges and showed by hitting, hundreds and hundreds, even I think it was like around 1,000 balls, that the wedge and spin consistency started to decrease. And I get these players all the time, and I'm sure there's a few listeners out there, probably not as many because you're listening to this podcast, so you're an equipment junkie. But you get these guys who are like a 3 or 4 handicap. They're like, I've been playing the same set of irons for the last 20 years. And I'm like, you're a moron. And they always look at me, and I'm like, you understand what the tread does on your sneakers, right? And they're like, yeah. And I go, when that tread is totally worn out, do you run in the rain? No, you don't, because you're going to break your neck. And it's the same thing with your irons. It's flattening out, and it's lowering and minimizing spin consistency. And I tell people, I'm like, if you're in love with, your Ping Zing irons or whatever the hell you've been playing forever, go get them remilled, but you need to keep those grooves sharp, because those grooves are what differentiates a new product versus an older product as far as wear is concerned.
All right. Well, we're bumping up against time because Chris has to go soon. So look what happened. We just keep talking. We say we're going to keep it tight. Keep it tight. Yeah.
Just failed miserably.
Do we want to get one more in here, or do we just want to call it?
We got one more.
Let's go.
We got one more.
I got a quick one. Another tour question here.
Hello, Drew from Seattle. Watching the U.S. Open made me think about this and wondering what your thoughts are. You have two people like Gregson and McIlroy coming down to the wire, and they're in separate groups. Why don't they just pair them up, at the 14th, 15th hole? What's the big deal? It's an entertainment business. It would make it that much better to see them play each other. What's your thoughts?
Where are they going to be? Did he say where they're going to be? Like, are they last group, penultimate group? And like, it'd be tough to like pair them up if like one guy's gonna have to wait around while the other, like, how are you gonna do that?
Well, that's just it. It's a competitive disadvantage to whomever. So one guy's in the one thing about sports is grooves. And if a guy's grooving along, grinding, and all of a sudden, he's 2 groups ahead and he takes the lead, and they're like, oh, okay, step off the tee for the next 30 minutes while, and then what do you do?
Right.
And then what do you do with the guy in the last group who's totally flamed out and is 5 shots over? Do you have him skip 2 holes ahead? I mean,
just pack it in. Let's just call it.
I mean, it's a cool idea, but
it's a great idea from an entertainment standpoint. Yeah. Just logistically, I don't see how
I can't.
Work.
Can't see how it works.
Logistics, organizational.
But what I do like about it is the entertainment aspect and maximizing that. And it's kind of interesting because Liv, I guess, does something similar in that on Sundays they reorganize the field to guarantee that, the leaders are finishing on 18. So it's not this continuous, kind of round. So you don't finish on 3 if you're leading the tournament.
You should get an advantage. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it for another hour, a rollicking hour of Fully Equipped. Episode 252. Oh, by the way. As always, if you want more gear goodness for us, check us out on social media. We are at Fully_Equipped on Twitter. We're at Fully Equipped Golf on YouTube. Maybe you're watching this on YouTube. And if you are, and you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And at Fully Equipped Golf on Instagram. And oh, by the way, last week I told y'all if you reached out to me on the side and told me which one of the Pac-Man products we were giving away, I would just give it to you you wouldn't have to even try and get in the running. And we had somebody, shout out to Scott Collins, by the way. He reached out at 4:45 a.m. on Thursday morning.
God bless him.
He said, heard on pod about giveaway for the custom Pac-Man ball markers. And I was like, done, man. If you're getting up and listening to the pod when it's dropping at 4:45 a.m., hell yeah, you get the ball markers. So anyway, shout out to Scott. So those are the ways to follow us. I think that's going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again next week with all kinds of fun stuff. OnlyFans. I don't even know what else. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you next week.